the thing that got me thinking about a force in the universe that might actually have a personality was horror films. It's the only genre that really takes the supernatural seriously.
Wyrd Wessex. Hello and welcome to Wyrd Wessex. I'm Andy.
And I'm Craig, and today we have the absolute honour to welcome Reverend Peter Laws to the show.
Peter is an ordained minister, which might seem an odd guest choice to anyone that's not aware of Peter's work. So for those who don't know, Craig, would you summarise Peter in a sentence?
Sure. So picture Jesse Cluster from the graphic novels Preacher, but instead of going on a hunt to find God, Peter writes for 14 Times. He's a celebrated horror author, host of one of my favourite podcasts, Into the Fog, and he's written the definitive book on why our interest in horror, true crime and the macabre isn't just acceptable, but actually healthy and normal. I'm sure we'll delve deeper into all of that, but Peter, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, Peter, also, we normally start with asking the guest to make their own elevator pitch, but I think Craig just sort of fanboyed all that for you, to be honest.
Oh, yeah, including the bit when you talked about that guy from Preacher, because the actor Dominic Cooper, I have actually been mistaken for him a few times in public by just people who've come up and thought I was him. He's like, I wish I was as handsome as he was, but and had the career that he has and all that. But yeah, it's very cool to be told that, because there was a period where people would think I looked a bit more like Mr. Bean, and that's not the look I'm going for, right? So
not quite the same.
I'll take Preacher over Mr. Bean.
All I ever get's Ross Noble, so I think you've definitely won up.
Yes, yeah, you do.
Yeah.
So, should we jump straight into your acclaimed non-fiction book, The Frighteners? Now, The Frighteners explores why humans are universally drawn to the macabre, horror, true crime, paranormal. Could you start by maybe explaining the core thesis of the book and how you landed on the title, The Frighteners? Was it affinity to that Peter Jackson film, or?
Yeah, I mean, on the title, I didn't actually think of the title because it was originally going to be. Well, I think my working title for it was something like Morbidology or something a little bit pretentious like that. But then we was in a meeting with, I think Pan Macmillan were originally going to publish it. And in some meeting, one guy there said, I think we should call it The Frighteners. And I'm like, yeah, but that's a film by Peter Jackson. They were like, yeah, it's fine. And then, yeah, but it's also a novel by a horror author called Stephen Laws from the 1980s. And I'm like, that could get confusing. And they're like, no, it'd be fine. So I really hadn't had a nonfiction book published at that point, and I'm like, well, I'll go along with what they say. So it's called The Frighteners, and actually that does seem to work for people. But there's no great other story behind that other than that's what some marketing guy came up with. But in essence, the book is trying to answer a question that I was certainly asked a lot when I was working full time as a church minister, which is like, how can you supposedly be a nice person if you're like working in churches and stuff? You're supposed to be a professional, nice guy, and yet you're quite happy to watch horrible things. And for many people, that just doesn't make sense, and it can be hypocritical in a way. They think, oh, well, you're supposed to be into goodness, and yet you seem to celebrate the darkness. And so I wanted to answer that question for myself, to ask, well, why do I like this stuff? Because I don't feel like a dark person, in the sense that when I watch a film where someone's getting stabbed, I'm not like sitting thinking, God, I'd love to go out and do that to someone right now. Like it's totally not that. And yet I do like to watch films where horrible things happen. So the book was my attempt to answer the question for myself, and also for millions of other people who are just like me, who, may not be church ministers, but they are, lovely, ordinary, everyday people. And yet they like blood, guts, gore, and death, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I did find it really interesting, and because I even, like, when my daughter was born, she's nearly 9 now, but I did go through a period where I stopped listening to all the like true crime podcasts and stuff. Initially.
Yeah,
I was like, oh no, I shouldn't be into this kind of stuff. And then I came back to it, but you've kind of justified it for me now that it's okay to.
Yeah, well, there are seasons actually. I mean, I found myself after, yes, like when we had kids, and I don't think you have to have kids to suddenly be bothered about violence towards children. You know, you can be bothered about that without kids. But I do remember, like, when I used to watch horror films, I used to get really annoyed that kids didn't get killed in these films, because I'd be like, well, I know they're going to find the body of this kid and it's going to be fine, because like it was always in a lot of the retro horror films, the kid never really died, other than a few films like, you know, Assault on Precinct 13 or whatever, and it used to take away the drama for me. So I was like, why don't they just kill the kid like anyone else, and then it makes it more scary. But then on the day that we had our first child, and I came home and we had the baby upstairs, and we decided to watch a film called Gone Baby Gone, which is about kids getting abducted or something. And I just remember I was watching that with my wife, and I was like, I can't watch this. Like, we're going to have to stop this. And she was the same. And I don't know, for us, maybe it took having an actual child in our life properly for us to suddenly go, oh, this actually this is real stuff. I can't handle this. So I do think there's seasons where you can handle certain things and not others. I can watch films now with kids dying. Don't know what that says about my kids. But you know, it was just very raw at the time.
I mean, you've kind of proposed that the morbid interest isn't just entertainment as well. It's kind of a way of us processing like mortality and the great unknown. Yeah, absolutely, yes, and I wouldn't want to skip over the idea that it's entertainment, because I personally think entertainment is a very important part of culture, and escapism is really needed. So sometimes I've seen other faith people who they try and justify watching or enjoying certain things because it has to have some sort of edifying educational effect, like, you know, you should watch The Traitors with your children and then you can learn about dishonesty, and it's a good opportunity to think about that. And yes, that's true, but you know, I like watching that show just because I like watching it. So half of it is just people enjoy watching horror films. You're right. So the entertainment thing is important, but the other part is really important, which is we watch frightening things because often we are frightened people. I'm a frightened person, I think. I find the world quite a scary place. I get disturbed by death and violence and suffering and loss and evil, if you want to call it evil. You know, just horrible things like that happen in the world. They really disturb me. But I'm not the sort of person who feels capable of just switching my mind off from it. So I can't just go and start watching The Sound of Music or something and go like, oh, hey, life's fine. I need to process those things in ways that I can handle. And so horror films and novels and true crime and all these sorts of things offer me a way to spend time in that world. But it's a world in which I'm kind of in control because I can switch it off. I can often a lot of horror films are fairly generic in the sense that you know where it's going to go, and almost can be quite comforting to watch these patterns. And I think that is a very complex way that we humans use to try and organize our fears and what disturbs us into patterns that we can manage. Yeah.
That's interesting. I mean, we have always had that as well, haven't we? I mean, I do a fair bit of storytelling, and you'd look at the old epics. You know, it all kind of there's horror in all of it, and I think you mention it in your in the book actually, don't you? That you know, sort of that you know, sort of you get some real nasty stuff in the Odyssey and the Iliad and things like that.
Exactly, and there's a critic, a literary critic called Leslie Fielder, who says that these great works of literature do not survive today and thrive today in the public consciousness because, despite of the violence in them, they probably survive precisely because of them. Those are the stories that were so dark that they connected with people. And so, yes, you look at some of the great works of literature and the stories that continue, they're really messed up and dark, but they offer ways of allowing us to kind of transcend the gritty crapness of that and look at it from an outside view. And when we do that, we almost kind of we become more confident in the face of these things.
Yeah, I mean, sort of Craig and I sort of in our other lives have both, I think, at one point been in a longhouse full of people dressed up as Vikings or Saxons listening to Beowulf. And, one of the
As you do.
bits, as you do, one of the bits that gets the biggest cheer is sort of, Grendel jointing the Thanes and sucking the blood out of them, or he getting his arm ripped off by some stuff that would horrify people. But I mean, is there anywhere you would say you draw an ethical line, if you don't mind me asking? Sort of, where does the interest in the macabre become sort of morally unhealthy or exploitative?
That's a good question. I only it depends on which arena we're talking about. So if we're talking about in the arena of art and expression, in some ways I don't think there is a line. Like I think all art needs to explore every facet of darkness, and so I don't get bothered that much if a film is really graphic or blasphemous even, like that doesn't bother me too much, because I think if God exists, he can handle all that stuff. Just art, it's an expression of people's frustration. So within art, yes, but I do draw a very hard line where anything exploits another person and causes actual real life violence, which I know that might sound obvious, but it is an important distinction to make, because I think some of the critics of horror culture and morbid culture, they come across and they equate the two. They think the two the same thing. They say, "Oh, you like playing Call of Duty because you must want to shoot up your school," and you're like, "Those are two completely different arenas." Yeah. And so I think you can do, in some ways, whatever you like within an artistic context, as long as it's not hurting anyone. But the second it goes into hurting anyone, even the tiniest amount of violence is wrong. And people notice this. People can watch the most shocking, violent fighting in films or violence, and they can like get excited and punch the air and go, "Whoa, that was amazing!" The way he just drop kicked that guy and sent him across the room. But it's a completely different feeling. If maybe you've been here, I certainly have, when you're in a pub or something and then somebody kicks off and then just starts pushing each other, and it's the smallest hint of violence and your heart just reacts to that in a completely different way. So we know in our hearts that these are two different things, and that's why I'm so comfortable with them. But the people who come along and equate the two and put them all together, I think those people it's just not their taste. They're not into scary, horrible things. And so they superimpose their own taste and moralize it. And they'll say, "Well, I don't like that stuff. Therefore, that means I don't want to kill anyone. You like that stuff, so you probably want to kill somebody." And it's just like, that's not how it works.
That's it. And I mean, the media we consume can definitely influence us, but it's kind of funny. It's more of in an overt, obvious way when that happens. Like last summer, I ended up on the opposing side to a bunch of people that were going after hotels and things when it all kicked off last summer. I was with the Stand Up to Racism guys.
Sure.
And one event we were at, one sort of counter protest we were at, got really nasty, and we had to be ringed by police for about 5 or 6 hours. And there was stuff, but the hate on people's faces, and that is like, and it's that moment you're like, "Oh God, this is actual violence." This is
exactly, it's the real thing,
like a freight train. But all these people had been influenced, but not by computer games, not by not by anything like that, but by the media they were consuming. So it very much can get you in sort of my opinion, but it doesn't tend to be a computer game or because people can make that distinction, right?
No, exactly. And I think when you mention like the media, in some ways the medium is some ways the problem. What I mean by that is we have to have some distance from between us and the horrible thing that we're witnessing for us to ever think it's enjoyable or interesting or valuable. So, for example, you can watch a film that is about a true life horror that happened maybe in a different part of the world and or a different time, and you can feel, okay, I feel safe with this. This is okay. You watch a film that maybe is a true crime that took place in your own town, and you're like going, "Oh man, this this is pretty dark. This is getting a bit disturbing, but I'm still okay. But if you obviously if your family member was part of that and was the victim, let's say, the distance is taken completely away. And when the distance is taken away, it ceases to become entertainment and it becomes much more complex. And therefore, it's understandable why you'd get more disturbed by that. But what can be happening in terms of when I say the medium is because we have our phones and we can view the world through our phones, that in itself, I think, can create a distance between us and the violence that we're viewing. And so what can happen is if, like, you know, when I was young and going into pubs and, you know, fights were kicking off, like I was just sort of watching it, you know, it was in my immediate world. There was no way for me to turn that into an almost fictionalized piece of media because I was just there. But as soon as I can lift up my phone and film it, the distance begins. And when that distance starts and it becomes more about creating a little bit of, not even necessarily content to share online, but just like, oh my word, I'm now capturing this in my little box. It does create a distance. And therefore, that can be a little bit dangerous because then we can cease to care as much about the violence that we're seeing in front of us because we've created distance. So it's pretty complex, but on the whole, like, the fact that human beings have done this for centuries and will continue to do it is not a sign that they're depraved. It's a sign that they have really quite ingenious ways of trying to cope with the things that scare the crap out of us.
That's good. I mean, you've got no one romanticizes modern day like mass serial killers of women like they do Jack the Ripper, for example, because you've got that distance of time, you know, as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it's getting short. But it's getting shorter in the sense of even, you know, things like, I mean, in the book The Frighteners, I do a whole chapter on murderabilia industry, which is people who buy articles or items that are connected with, you know, real life serial killers, and you can buy things like you can buy soil that's collected from the ground on which somebody was murdered, for example. And sometimes these things are not that long ago. I held a lock of Charles Manson's hair in my hand at a shop that was selling it for £40 a strand, and you could put it in a little pendant and have around your neck. And so there's definitely some kind of pretty funky stuff going on. But this is why, like, I'm a big believer in trying not to put too much distance between each other. I don't mean us three, but, like, you know, I'm talking about us and everybody. Because I think if once we start distancing ourselves from other people, we start to then kind of stereotype them and write them off. And it's just sad, because I think that way darkness lies. You know, we're supposed to try and kind of understand one another, even if we completely disagree with one another.
Yeah. So we've kind of jumped ahead a little bit from the beginning there. So we always kind of assume that it's a listener's first time hearing a guest. You know, we can't assume they've seen you before. So I wondered if you want to briefly kind of walk us through your life path, because I know you started off as an anti-religious youth before you're ordained. So do you want to give us kind of the rundown?
Yeah, sure. Well, it began in the womb. Well, how far back am I getting? No. I was brought up a really kind of never went to church or anything like that, and I was very antagonistic towards Christianity and church. However, I really did love horror films and the paranormal and spooky things. That was what made my kind of brain come alive. But religion I was very antagonistic towards. I was in a band for a little while at school called Creatures of the Night. We would sing songs about spitting on the Bible and, you know, angry young man type stuff, having a cosmic issue with God. But anyway, I ended up becoming a Christian when I was at university, which is a long story, but that was quite a shock to everyone else, never mind me. But I did end up actually start going to church, which was a bit wild. And since then, I worked as a church minister for about 12 years with young people and then with adults. But during that time, I got the urge to start writing, because I'm a very creative type of person. So I started writing novels, and then I was lucky enough to get a 2-book deal for these novels. And so there's been 4 of those out now. And they're like sort of creepy crime fiction, like a an ex-church minister turned atheist professor trying to track down Christian maniacs and serial killers and stuff, like religiously motivated criminals. Yeah. And then also wrote this nonfiction book as well. But I don't know if you guys know this, because I know that Craig, you do some writing with as well. But I just found it very, very challenging to make a living from writing books, even though like I've got books, multiple book deals and deals in different countries and stuff. And I was thinking, that should be fairly straightforward then, but it's really not. It's really hard to make a living as an author. And so I hopped over to podcasting and then worked in podcasting for a while. But then for the last 2 years or so, I've been working as a host of a YouTube show called Into the Fog with Peter Laws. And that has been, really successful, to be honest. It started off with maybe about 20 subscribers and was like limped along, got about 100 about 3 months later. But then suddenly it just started picking up, and then now it's almost 150,000 subscribers, full-time job, over 11 million views in a couple of years or 18 months or something. So really, really amazing. And so that's my focus now is telling true stories of the paranormal through my YouTube channel, Into the Fog with Peter Laws.
Fantastic. Share your secrets with us when it comes to that.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry, go
on. I was going to say, you just got to show a bit of leg.
See, I've been telling you, Craig.
That's it. Yeah. That's the key. No, not really.
If you sign up to our Patreon, Peter Laws will show you his leg. My dad used to actually watch us, but now he's moved over to this one, Into the Fog or something, apparently. So,
wow, what a Judas! What a beautiful Judas!
Would you say the change was simply due to the wish to express your creativity and pursue that path? Was there any theological shift that you had, or was it just that opportunity arose? Would you say?
It wasn't a massive shift in terms of like, do you mean like from stepping away from being a church minister and starting to do this stuff?
You don't have to sort of go into like the deep detail of that.
Sure.
You don't want to, but more like, was it a combination of factors, and was that a factor?
Well, I mean, when I was training to be a church minister, I remember sitting down with one of the tutors and saying, is this weird? But I cannot envisage myself as being like a local church pastor for the rest of my life. Whereas all of the people who were training with me, that was like their dream, like that was their vision. And I'm like, I don't see that for myself. Does that mean I shouldn't be training for this? And they were like, oh, no, there's people who come and train for this stuff that don't necessarily go on to work as church ministers. There's other things they can do. But also, so I share that to say it wasn't a shock. It wasn't like something bad happened in church that really put me off, and I decided to say, "Oh, screw you! See you in hell, candy boys!" And then start
storm off.
Yeah, it wasn't nothing like that. It was always kind of part of the plan, I suppose, to embrace my creativity when the opportunity arose. But also, as well as being creative in general, I'm also a creative person when it comes to theology and philosophy and those sorts of things. What I mean by that is I get claustrophobic if I get sort of tied down to one very specific way of viewing the world. And I was finding that actually that part of my personality can be quite frustrating for some fellow Christians, because they'll say, well, you need to know your answer with this, and if I would say things like, well, hey, maybe God doesn't exist, which is totally possible, of course. Like it would be weird for me not to be open to that. Some people found that really kind of disturbing, because they have this sense that we have to be 100% one or the other, and that's just not how my mind works. So even though the opportunities came to do creative stuff, which is where I really thrive, I don't know if I have got what it takes to, I certainly don't have what it takes to be a fundamentalist Christian. I don't have that in me. that's not the way my mind works. I'm too open-minded.
Do you still work within the church, or did they give you any kind of resistance to what you're doing? Because like you say, the idea is kind of
funnily enough, there was no resistance actually, because they were pretty open-minded with what I was doing, but I got put onto something called a secondment, which meant it was like I was still part of the denomination, but I was doing sort of slightly unusual things, and I'm still leading churches now and again on the weekends. But these days I don't do quite as much as that. I do still do one day of chaplaincy, where I'll go and do work that way. But I don't technically have to do that. I could just stick with YouTube full time. That's certainly possible. But then would I be stuck in this little room all week and
gets you out of the house, I guess.
Gets me out of the house, yeah. Exactly. Yeah. But I find that our journeys, and I don't know if this is like with you or maybe with your listeners, our journeys in our life can appear quite chaotic, but that's the adventure part, and even the scary parts. Like all the best adventures have scary parts in them. Otherwise, they're not really adventures. So I tend to see. I don't look at my life and go, "Oh, I did this for a while. That was a waste of time, and now I'm doing the thing." I find it all sort of part of an interesting bundle.
Yeah, it wouldn't have really been the same story if had gone and Bilbo stayed at his hobbit hole and decided not to go out that day.
Yeah, exactly. Who wants to know about that? Bill Boring. That's what I'd call that book. Lord of the Borings. Thanks. Can you put a rim shot in there? Yeah.
We got it.
Yeah, so kind of tying together, as we were talking about horror before, I was wondering kind of how you personally reconcile your love of horror and the macabre with your faith. Like, I don't know how, I don't want to put words into your mouth or anything, but do you feel God is interested in or even amused by kind of humanity's fascination with the dark?
Sure, I think so, because I take that based on the fact that the Bible itself is really quite a horrific text at times. The author Will Self called the Bible a grand guignol of tedium, which is pretty impressive way of putting it. Yeah, very creative. But he was talking about how shocking some of the things are. And there really are some grotesque images in there, things that, if I was to put them, make them into a film, like stuff in Revelation where there's the beast is crouching between a mother's legs, just like eagerly waiting for the baby to be born, and once the baby comes out, it instantly devours this baby coming out of her. That's just pretty messed up, but it's all in the Bible itself. And yet I don't therefore think that if God does exist, he's some sort of twisted maniac, but rather that he acknowledges there's darkness in the world and that he's able to use dark colors to illustrate these things. And so I think God is a very good understander of these two different worlds I talked about before, the world of make-believe and the world of reality. And so I think when it comes to like watching the Texas Chainsaw Massacre or whatever, I don't think God's going like, "Oh my goodness, you put her on a hook. That's awful." He's like, right, okay, yeah, this is creative, this is interesting, this is telling an interesting story. But again, the moment that in real life somebody treats somebody with even the most 1% of violence, I think God is bothered. So when we're talking about fictional stuff, that's how I kind of reconcile it. And I've done interviews with Christian radio stations before where they've said stuff like, "Oh, after you've watched a horror film, do you have to spend a couple of hours like praying it out of your system?" Do you know what I mean? I'm like, no, because like why? Like it's fake, and And if it's touching on real things, then it's important to touch on real things.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have no problem with it. And interestingly enough, I used when I said I used to be really anti-religion and Christianity, which is true. I really paid no heed to Christians themselves. So when they came into school, like these hip young Christians with their rainbow strap guitars and stuff, trying to make me become a religious person, I was like, yeah, whatever. And so I really dismissed them. But the thing that made me start thinking about spiritual things, and yes, even the existence potentially of a divine character in the sky that people might think of or call it God. The thing that got me thinking about a force in the universe that might actually have a personality was horror films. Horror films that are really quite religious in many ways, because they are the very few parts of culture that say things like, hey, maybe there's such a thing as actual good and evil. Hey, maybe there's a thing as life after death. Maybe there's more to life than just, this. They're the only. It's the only genre that really takes the supernatural seriously.
Like that.
Yeah, and surely, like religion of all things, is a supernatural business. So to me, horrors are the most suitable in many ways.
Why do you think like those more fantastical, shall we say, elements of the Bible are in there then? Just for entertainment?
Do you mean like the images of the dragons and monsters? Well, I mean, people misunderstand the Bible, and people think the Bible is like a textbook or something that is supposed to have everything completely right and everything completely sort of locked down, whereas actually it's a collection of 66 different books, all in different genres, and including, for example, apocalyptic literature. So the book of Revelation is in the genre of apocalyptic literature, where there are these images of the great beast and have a mark on the forehead and all these sorts of horrific images. But it doesn't necessarily mean that there's an actual moment where, Jesus opens his mouth and a sword comes out and there's all these like freaky monsters around the temple with like loads of eyes and things. There are like symbols and images of something that mysteries that we don't fully understand.
It's the most metal of all books of the Bible, though.
Very metal, yeah, very, very much so. And also another angle as well is, even if you have people within the Bible who are doing things in the name of God that look barbaric, I don't think that means that you have to say, oh, well, it's in the Bible, therefore God must approve of that. Because there's loads of stuff that happens in the Bible that God does not approve of, because he disapproves of it there and then. Like there's like murders happening and God's going, you shouldn't have done that. That's shocking. Or I don't agree with that. So to me, the Bible is almost like a kind of an evolution of us trying to understand, like, what does it mean to be human? And it contains some things, particularly in the Old Testament, that you could say are misunderstandings of what God is like, tribalistic, wipe out all the people, we'll take their land, that sort of stuff. And then what happens is the Christian side of things comes along and says, well, actually, if you want to know what God's like, you're supposed to look at this Jesus fella. And Jesus basically said, well, to sum up the whole law is to say, love God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. And like that's kind of it. And God is love, Love. It's not, God is not, control or coercion or, So yeah, I think the Bible is a complex text, but it is not just a sort of textbook that, like, it has contradictions in it. It has things which is quite normal if you see the book as for what it is. But if you think it's some sort of inerrant piece of literature that gets every single thing correct, it's ignoring the fact that there's human beings within the Bible getting things wrong.
I mean, I guess that's the danger of anything becoming too rigid dogma, really, isn't it? And people do interpret things that way. I mean, I like your point about how God sees it. Sort of the horror films, for example. I refuse that. The that God, the creator of everything. I refuse to believe that they don't get there. They made everything, the sun, the sky, the earth, us, but they don't get nuance. It just doesn't really make sense, does it?
Completely. Yeah, exactly. It's like, is if God exists, am I like a more like intelligent film critic that's like, I can tell this is just a piece of art or a piece of imagery. Whereas is God sitting there going, I can't believe it, human centipede? You actually want people to do that? It's like, no. Like if I can work that out, I'm sure an omnipotent, omniscient God can figure it out. Especially because he presumably was in the heads of all of the people when they were coming up with these things. Do you know what I mean? Knows these people inside out.
I'm not sure God was in the head of the Human Centipede 2 production.
That's got to be the devil's influence. Surely.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, it kind of leads on to the next bit. So we're not talking about Human Centipede. Don't worry.
Would you rather be front or back?
Oh no,
definitely front of the line.
I mean, that's
like I can't believe you even asked that question. Like
that's how
who would rather be at the back? You weirdo.
That's how we root out the really weird guests.
Yeah. Always the front.
You follow that up.
What would you rather be in the middle? Best of both worlds.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, front for me.
Convince yourself if they die off at the front, you'll get to be the one at the front. I don't know.
Yeah. I met once. I was chatting to the guy out of the Human Centipede 2 once, and I stupidly got mixed up with the name of the film, and I was like, "Hey, I really loved. I really was impressed with your work in The Human Caterpillar." and I said that because I had little kids at the time when I was reading The Hungry Caterpillar to them, and I was getting it mixed up in my mind.
You don't want to know what he went and read as a bedtime story.
Oh, yeah.
So, in your view, when we look at the paranormal like phenomena, ghosts, poltergeists, unexplained events, do you believe we're genuinely encountering things that exist beyond a material reality? Do you think it's all in people's heads, a mix of the two?
Again, like on the subject of God, I'm open to the idea that it's not real and it's all in people's heads. However, if you want me to vote on the topic, I'm voting that it's real, because there's just, and the older I get, the more I think it's real. And that's because I'm starting to, particularly with Into the Fog, and I do I've been an expert on a radio show called... Yeah. I've been an expert a few times on the show Uncanny, which is a BBC show, and now with Into the Fog, just getting like just so many contacts from people who have had experiences, and the more and more you talk to these people, and you can tell, you can kind of tell sometimes it's people who are just trying to, push a book or something like that. But sometimes there's people you contact you and say, I don't even want you to tell anyone about this. I'm just so traumatized by what happened. I'm trying to understand it. This happened to me. And it happened to my whole family. And I'll sometimes, even just today, I've got an episode coming up and a witness tells me something, and then I start getting in contact with their family and just say, did this really happen? And they're like, this happened. We don't understand it. So the more and more, the years go by, the more convinced I am like that there really is something going on in this world, that the paranormal is real. What that means, as in like, does it mean ghosts are the dead? Does it mean ghosts are time slips? Does it mean we're somehow brushing up against other dimensions? I don't know. But I think it's quite hard for me to comfortably stay in that there's no such thing. Because, and especially when I've had a couple of experiences now myself, and when you have an experience yourself, it's very instructive, because what happens is I've shared my 2 experiences that I've had through my show Into the Fog in 2 separate videos, and it's just amazing how quick people come back and say in comments. Most people are very supportive. I have an amazingly supportive audience, which is really quite wonderful. But occasionally, you'll get things saying, you can tell this guy's lying. Look at his face. And I'm like, I'm literally telling the absolute honest truth, right? Like I know I'm not lying. And you just realize how sometimes for some skeptics, just think they've got like a slam dunk, and they base it on just one little thing. So, for example, I mean, they might say, well, they had a haunted house, but they had a segment on a TV show about it. So they did it for that. Like thinking that somehow they got paid loads of money for it or something like that. I've got a case coming up on Saturday where somebody allowed an American TV show to come on because that was the only way they could get the paranormal experts to come into the house, because the paranormal experts charged $200 a day, and this family were close to losing their house and they couldn't afford it any other way. And so they called these paranormal experts saying, look, can you come and help us with our haunting? And they were like, well, it'll cost you like $2,000. Because, I mean, to be fair to them, they would have to travel from a different part of the country and stay there for like 10 days. So it's not, they weren't charlatans. They do have to like cover their expenses and stuff.
Yeah.
But this woman was like, there's no way I'm telling the world this. This is so traumatic and humiliating. I can't do this. And she hung up, and the stuff continues. And then her family's just saying, we've run out of the privilege of keeping this private anymore. We're going to have to say yes to this TV show just so we can get the people to come in and sort this out. Because otherwise we're screwed. We can't afford to go to a new house. We can't sell this house because of all the weirdness going on. But people just, they don't necessarily think that deeply, and they just go, oh, well, you were on a TV show, so that made you a millionaire. No.
That links quite nicely actually to another question that I had for you, was because you recently did an episode talking about how we shouldn't dismiss famous cases like Amityville.
House on the hill. Yeah, Amityville.
I wondered whether, why do you think modern culture is so keen to debunk the paranormal so swiftly? Like, is it a fear that these things might actually exist, or I don't know?
I mean, I think most skeptics are like honorable people, you know, in the sense that they have a very strong sense of justice, and they don't want people to be exploited. And that has happened. There's been plenty of people who have been exploited by, say, fake mediums or pretend hauntings, perhaps, that, you know, were just about getting clicks or stuff like that, or like, you know, TikToks of like, oh, look, the cupboard door opens, and just fakery, basically. And so I think skeptics quite rightly want to hold up a light to that and say, stop exploiting people. This is especially when it comes to people's, you know, emotions around grief, because there's a few different YouTube channels that you can watch where, you know, like a famous person will die. I don't know, like say Michael Jackson dies on the Monday, and then on a Thursday there's a video of them contacting Michael Jackson through the spirit box, and the tuning in. And then yeah, exactly. They can hear all that stuff. Oh, he's there. We've got him. And you can hear that they've like taken snippets from old interviews and just slowed them down, like really slowed them down, so they sound ethereal and stuff. And that sort of stuff, you're like, this is out of order, man. You shouldn't be doing this. This is just straight up lying. Some of these people who do that. So yes, so I don't think skeptics are scared of it being real. I think they're bothered about people being hurt and exploited. But I think what can happen is sometimes when you're looking at certain cases, the skeptics can almost end up feeling like they're playing a game of whack-a-mole, where you're like, oh, a cold spell in the house, right? Oh, it's just the heating went wrong. Like, oh, you heard footsteps in the attic? It's the pipes. And then, yeah, at first you go, yeah, okay, fair enough. But then it's like, oh, the whole family saw a full-bodied apparition in the bathroom at the same time. Group hallucination. Knock that down. Like, oh, okay. So the police came round and they saw the table sliding across the floor by itself. Earthquake. And you just add, and the cumulative effect of this evidence ends up making you go, wait a minute, like, I was with you for the first couple, but you're having to stretch credulity now, when it's totally reasonable to just also say, hey, but maybe it actually happened. But I appreciate for some people that's a very big leap.
But also, I mean, it's the very idea that there a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them jumping not to. I don't think what you saw as a ghost. It could have been this. It could have been that. A lot of them jump to, you're faking this, you're making this up, which is two very different things. You know, even if it didn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully, like on shows like Uncanny, the skeptics, and a lot of the skeptics that I know are not quite as like crass as that, and so they will really think through it. But certainly online and in comments and stuff like that, it's you will frequently get that where it's just like, oh, you can tell they're lying. Like the episode that I did about a paranormal experience that I had in 1993, and I kept a diary of it because I was so freaked out. I'd written it down in a diary, and then I think I'd returned to it at some point and added the date on it. Or so I can't remember what I'd done, but I remember doing it, and I did it in a different colored pen, and I just didn't even think at the time that was a big deal. But I showed a picture of this diary because I was saying, look, this is where I wrote it down. And then a few comments are saying, ha, look, that bit's in black and that bit's in blue. Clearly this is fake. And it's like, poof, mic drop moment. And they're like, what? I mean, okay, well spotted, but it doesn't mean anything. And again, because I experienced that, I know I didn't fake anything. Like I'm 100% sure that I didn't lie at all in that. So it makes you more sympathetic to other people who come forward and share their stuff when they just get sort of jumped on by the more clubber over the head skeptics. And of course, equally, it does go the other way. There's people who just go full on, well, it's a demon. You know, like...
or every photo they see a thing in the background.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's definitely a balance to be had. And I can be, I'll get messages from people and I'll go, actually, everything's taking place while you're in bed. No one else is seeing this thing. Like this could be a dream you're having. So quite open to being a skeptic myself sometimes, but there's too much stuff going on for me to remain in that camp for long, because I end up discovering, other things that push me towards the belief.
I think that's kind of where we've gone with the kind of couple of years we've been doing the show. The more stories we tell, like we were, I think both initially would say quite skeptical to begin with, but after a while of doing it, you start to think like all these people can't be wrong.
Yeah.
There's too many people that see, and not even just ghosts, even when it comes to things like UFOs and Bigfoots and things like that. Like, there's
not going
to
pretend to know what it is, but it's I do think I'm definitely more of a believer than I was when we started the show, and I always say to people that I was hoping Craig would be the Mulder to my Scully, but we're both kind of Scully. Although you reckon you've always been Mulder, you've always wanted to believe.
Yeah.
I've got the tattoo, so team I want to believe is what I say.
Yeah.
No, it's good that people feel able to, be one or the other, in the sense that like we can be a community together. But, and this is the same with Into the Fog, and it's just, this is something that's just the way my mind works. It's like I don't want to create a believers only show or a skeptics only show. I want to have a combination of people and people to feel willing to be part of the same tribe, no matter what they think. So that's important to me. However, when you do talk about like team believer and team skeptic, and you feel like you have to decide which team you're on, I think that it's perfectly noble to be in the team I don't know yet, and that is in some ways the most honest place to be, because if you're open-minded to these things, then I think you find yourself sometimes, on some cases, you're in believer, sometimes you're in skeptic. And it's okay. You don't have to decide. And you certainly don't have to think, the older I get, the more concrete I should be in my views. I think that's a total misunderstanding of maturity. People think to get more and more mature, you need to lock down in what your opinions are. But it's the opposite. I think maturity is starting to hold on loosely to your own expertise, and it's starting to realize that actually, the older I get, maybe I don't know what the answer is, and therefore I'll be open to learn from other people.
So from the countless like real life stories you've covered in Into the Fog, Could you share the sort of, if you've got one, the one true sort of paranormal or crime account that you personally found the most chilling or the most compelling?
There's been a lot of them that I've found very compelling, but there's a one where there's the poltergeist case in a place called Socky in Scotland, spelt like kind of Sauchi, and that was a really fascinating case to work on, to present, because this was a situation, it was a classic where, you know, you've got a young girl in a family and they start hearing like scratching and knocking behind their headboard, and they start inviting people and they can hear it, and then the chest of drawers is shaking and doing all these weird things, and there's all this stuff getting witnessed by multiple people and going on record as saying they saw it. But what really kind of made that case quite remarkable was that she went into school on like the Monday, and while she was in school, it was like in the 60s, so you know they've got these desks that you kind of have these hatches that you open.
Yeah.
Like the desk started like jumping up and down, and the hatch is doing like this, and the desk is almost kind of levitating, and you think like, that sounds so stupid and ridiculous, like, but this is getting witnessed by teachers and fellow pupils. And because the person I was connected with, called Malcolm Robinson, who wrote a great book on this poltergeist, was able to kind of get connections with some of the people who were there at the time as school kids, and they even now, and I could see their writings now, where they were saying, "Oh, I saw it. Like, I remember that day. I remember being in the class and seeing the table like lift up and sort of move towards the teacher and all this sort of stuff." So it's a bit like the Enfield poltergeist, where you've got multiple people seeing things, and then they call like the police, and the police see the thing sliding around, and then they call the News of the World, and they come and they see things happening. And to me, it's when you're seeing multiple witnesses seeing this stuff, I find those sorts of things very, very compelling indeed.
I mean, do you think like the existence of ghosts challenges or complicates your religious framework, right? Because like, I certainly, if I die, I don't want to become a ghost, because they always seem to die tragically, don't they?
Yeah.
So like, I don't know.
What do you mean by challenges? Do you mean like it?
Because if just, I guess from a Christian standpoint, we die and we go to heaven. So,
interesting. Yeah.
But if we have ghosts, does that then challenge that idea? Because
that's a fair question.
I suppose, are staying around.
Yeah, that's a fair question. It probably comes from a more evangelical point of view to say that there is no such thing as ghosts, and we die and face judgment and stuff, and that's it. Because a lot of evangelical Christians do believe that, and therefore say it's not possible to have a ghost. It therefore must be demonic. And that's where you get this word demon so much, because they feel like it's somebody masquerading as your, if you go on the Ouija board and you talk to your Uncle Bill, it's not Uncle Bill, it's a demon trying to entice you away from Christ. It's that sort of rhetoric. However, in other traditions of Christianity, they're much more open to the idea of ghosts. Catholics are a little bit more open. They have purgatory, the idea of a kind of middle ground. And so there's the potential of connecting with the spirits of somebody who passed on. But also the Bible itself does talk about ghosts. There's a moment where the witch of Endor is called upon by King Saul to resurrect a man called Samuel, a prophet who died, and he comes up and they talk to him. And there's never a moment in the Bible that says, but of course it wasn't a ghost, it was a demon. It just talks about the ghost of Samuel. And also there's the Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration, where he is witnessed with Elijah and Moses. And Elijah didn't quite die, in the sense that he just sort of vanished into the sky. It's a really weird story, so we don't know exactly what happened. He was abducted by angels or something. But we don't have an account of him dying, so you can go, oh, okay, well maybe he never died, and maybe that's why he's on the Mount of Transfiguration with Jesus. But Moses full on died, and it's recorded not only of him dying, but his body being buried. And then suddenly in the New Testament, he's like literally hanging out with Jesus. And the disciples are seeing this. 3 of the disciples are seeing this in front of them. And all I'm saying is, like, you don't have to use the word ghost, but like there's moments where people see somebody who's dead and they see them. And to me, that's what we know as a ghost.
Yeah, I guess it's how you deal with the whole sort of eschatology of it all, sort of whether it's whether it is sort of a ghost in what we'd think of as a restless spirit, or ghost sort of something that's been, sort of released from heaven maybe to go and chill with Jesus as Moses did.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, maybe that's how it works. We don't know. But it just, there seems to be a kind of, well, the Celtic spirituality approach calls these places like thin places, that there are areas where, this world and whatever the next world is brushes up against each other. And whether or not that's what's happening, that just life is way more complicated than we think. Or, and this is a theory I've been kind of dotting around with lately in my head, is the idea of God being eternal. And if we're made in God's image, then what happens if God is eternal, he's not confined by time, and therefore he doesn't look at a timeline like we do, where, oh, Elvis Presley died a few decades ago and now he's not alive, but Sydney Sweeney's alive today. And it's like, there's the timeline. Whereas God is able to, like, everything collapses in on its own. It just becomes all at the same time, everything everywhere all at once, and it could totally handle that. What happens when we see a ghost, we are somehow getting like just a tiny moment of God's eternal mind that we're seeing through time or through, I don't know exactly what it is, but I guess the point to me is that it's a mystery, and I'm quite happy with like it's a mystery.
Yeah, I like that sort of a potential sort of more Christian take on, or a more religious take on, like time slips, I guess, in a way,
Yeah, potentially. I need to look that up, because I was thinking about it the other day, and I was like, I don't know if I've ever read anyone say that, but it just came to my mind the other day, like, what happens if that could be another reason.
My daughter's theory is that ghosts are people that are in heaven, but we can't see heaven, so they can come and go almost and see. They can visit us, but they are in heaven where they are, and it just looks different to them. That's
cool.
Where she's at. And that's at nearly 9, which is quite an interesting theory.
Yeah. And this is the idea. I mean, I like H.P. Lovecraft, and this story From Beyond, where, they create this like machine, the resonator, and it allows people to see into different dimensions, and then suddenly they start to discover, like, oh my word, like all around us we just don't see them, or these, like, the entire universe is just packed with these hideous worms, and they're just brushing up against each other, and they're just like with tentacles and stuff, and they're just like moving through us at all times, and we're mashed up in this. It's just we don't see it. But this resonator allows people to suddenly start seeing these hideous monsters that are part of this kind of other dimension that isn't next door. It's all collapsed in one whole, and we just don't happen to notice it. So I love that story, because it's a horrible thought. The thought of, like,
it touched me.
Tentacle moving through your head.
Yeah, I think I prefer Ocean's idea of.
That's nice.
The people in heaven, there, it's like, going to see us, it's like going on safari,
Yeah.
It's all just going, oh, look, alive people.
Well, C.S. Lewis wrote a great book called The Great Divorce, where people from hell who live in hell, they get to have a day trip to heaven. And so they go on a bus, and they go on this little coach trip, and it takes them up to heaven. And they get out, and the first thing they notice is when they put their feet on the grass of heaven, it hurts their feet. And when they go near the waterfalls of heaven, the spray from the water hurts them when it hits their face. And they're trying to figure out why this is, and they discover the reason why it hurts them is because heaven is more real than they are. The grass is coming up through their feet, and the water is hitting them and going through them, because rather than heaven being this, like, it's all like this wispy, ghostly, drifting around vibe, it's actually the opposite. It's hyper reality, and our reality here is just simply not as real as we think it is. Like it's the idea that, you know, people like with physics, you know, everyone thinks like you think you're sitting on that chair right now, but you're not actually sitting directly on the chair. There's forces pushing up from the chair and pushing down from you. That's like you're slightly hovering above the chair, but you don't notice that. You don't see that. You're not, because we've got atoms in us, we're not fully solid. There's so much empty space around us and in us, but we just don't see it because we just think everything is flesh and blood and black and white. And I think the idea of what Lewis was saying was like, you know, maybe heaven is true reality, because it's even more dense. It explains why, you know, things like when Jesus comes back from the dead and you see him walking through walls, and people are like, how did he get into the locked room with the disciples? You know, did he come down shimmy down a drain pipe, or probably not?
He's a ghost.
Yeah, was he a ghost? Yeah, or did he walk through the doors and the walls in the same way as you and I would walk through a morning mist? Not because he was less real than the door, but because he was more real than the door.
Yeah, the door sort of parts for him in that sense of that's the translucent kind of set, you know, sort of only sort of permeable thing, isn't it?
Yeah. So the stuff of heaven is more real than the stuff of earth.
I like that. That's it's gone away sort of. I knew it was always going to be a bit that way. It's going to go more philosophical than I thought it would. I like.
Yeah. We can bring it back to Hungry Caterpillar if you want.
I mean, you know, always. But when exploring sort of historical or local sort of legends, how do you personally sort of separate the genuine folklore and cultural sort of memory from the outright fabrication? Is there a point where the story sort of do you find it, and you sort of semi-answered this already, but do you find there's a point where the story sort of becomes more important than the truth, or?
No, for me, the truth is very important. So I try not to tell folk stories on my channel. It's great for other. I mean, there's plenty of other channels for that, but I'm not that interested in telling stories where it's stuff like, you know, like ghost stories where they're quite slight because it'll say, oh, she threw herself from the, they say she threw herself from the tower after she lost her loved one when he went off with someone else. And some say at night, you still hear her wailing as you see her fluttering dress falling from the tower. That sort of stuff, I'm like, not interested. Because I'm interested in terms of it's folklore, or it's a spooky tale, and it's interesting in that sense. But I'm not interested in that for like Into the Fog, because like I want actual stories of people who have experienced real things, and that's why I never exaggerate. I never like exaggerate or make up anything. So the stuff that I share is literally the stuff that people claimed. Sometimes what they claim sounds absolutely crazy, but I want to present what they said so that people know. So yeah, for me, I'm not as I think folklore is very interesting, but it just doesn't scratch the same itch for me as the true stories do. And also, actually, interestingly, older ghost stories also don't interest me quite as much. So when people say a story like, oh, you know, in this pub that you see a Roman centurion like walking through the cellar, and he walks through the wall, like I'm like, okay, but I'm way more interested in a 1970s ghost in a kind of semi-detached or terraced house in Sheffield. That people are claiming to see things from the fairly recent past. I just find more recent ghosts a little bit more interesting than ancient ones.
Comes back to connection almost, doesn't it? I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. The distance between me and a Roman centurion is just too great.
Although time isn't linear, so maybe not.
Well, exactly. Yeah. If I had more of the mind of God, maybe I'd be more into ancient ghosts.
I think the mind of God should be the name of your next mead brew, Craig.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a bold claim for a bottle of mead.
Drink from the mind of God.
I mean, I run one of sort of part-time gig is storytelling, and I do story walks in Hertfordshire.
Oh, great.
And when I started them, it was all local folklore with like old ghost stories. But I found the more I did them, the more new ghost stories I got to add. And to the point where I was meeting people that had experiences in pubs that we'd stop in and things like that. So, and that's always, I'd always say, I won't name you, but do you mind if I tell that, And like, there was one there was this highwayman who called Walter Clibb, and he used to flog pies at markets, and then he'd go to the edge of town and wait for whoever had the most money we'd sold a pie to rob him. And eventually he gets his comeuppance, and this is like in the 1700s.
Yeah.
And I honestly thought I'd made it up to scare some kids when I said about hearing the sound of him being dragged behind the horse's back to the roadside where he was buried with a stake through his heart. That bit's true. But the sound, like people hearing the sound at night. But then I started hearing other people say it, and I thought, have I started a story? Have I started a ghost story? Because I feel bad about that.
Yeah.
But then I met someone who claims they heard it.
Uh-huh.
So, I'm like, okay, maybe that is a thing, and my mind just went there. But, it's interesting, sort of, and more people were opening up about it. It's great, so I'd like to think it's improved my walks as well. But it's always great in my mind having those sort of first-hand accounts or even second-hand accounts, but more recent ones. So I get the feeling of connection there.
You might not want to have this bit on air, but can I ask you where in Hertfordshire you are from?
I've talked about it plenty. It's Hertford.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've been to Hertford. I used to live in London Coney.
Oh yeah, I know.
Near St Albans.
I do a lot of storytelling at St Albans Cathedral.
Ah, cool. So I had to have like some sort of ministers meeting thing in Hertford once where I had to go, and I spoke at Hertford Baptist Church once or twice.
Oh yeah, just at the bottom of Port Hill.
Yeah, the bottom of a hill.
I used to go to a youth Cov night, I think they called it back then. I used to go there when I was
like a coven?
Yeah, that's how they just call it Cov night. It's,
so I thought you said a youth coven.
Churches. It's Cov night they called it, and it was. I mean, I was never overly religious. It was more of a did really cheap like biscuits and cans of Coke, and my mates went. But it was,
no, I've got you.
But it's a fascinating history there. But it's and St Albans Cathedral is beautiful as well.
Yeah.
If you're ever there, if you ever happen to be passing by mid-September, that's around when I do most of my storytelling to sort of tie into the heritage stuff. So come say hello.
Cool, we'll do. Heckle.
Yeah, please do. You can join my dad. He also likes to heckle me. So
right. He wants to be in the middle of the human centipede, everyone.
Oh, no. It's like, Peter, I'm taking the school kids around for a story walk.
Let me explain what the middle actually means.
Oh.
All right, now I'm going to bring it back to our questions.
Be the voice of reason.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it kind of ties in, actually, because I had a question about, because you often kind of bring a little bit of humour into the stories, and particularly any interviews I've heard with you. I think it's fair to say you've got probably a similar sense of humour to us, a little bit of a dark sense of humour sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes too dark.
But
that's subjective.
How important is humour, do you think, in discussing these kind of grim and unsettling things?
Hugely. Humour is hugely important, and humour and comedy are very similar to horror in the sense that they offer like immediate feelings and reactions that if you watch a comedy film or a horror film, they have some of the same sort of beats, the same sort of kind of reactions, where it's not that subtle. You're like, you'll jump in shock, and then you'll like laugh in mirth if something good happens. So I think humor is very, very important. I've noticed that I find that like humor and horror are similar in the sense that I can listen to a horror. I watched a film the other day, which was so like hardly anyone's ever talks about it, but it was so horrific. Like it was a series of 3 stories, and the first story was so depressing and so horrific, it was shocking. But I thought it was really interesting in what it was saying, but it was truly shocking. And I was just like disturbed watching it like this. A film called Family Portrait, an American trilogy. And the first thing is just unreal. Anyway, but as soon as I saw, I was so disturbed by this, I had to go straight out and tell people about it. And I find that once I start telling people about it, I'm not shocked. I'm not as shocked about it anymore, because somehow if I'm the teller, I'm in charge of it.
Controlling it.
I control it, yes. And it's the same with humor. Like I can hear, like toilet humor, for example. Like if I hear somebody else like making like full on really like low grade, immature toilet humor, sometimes I'll just go, oh, that's so gross. Like, why did you put that image in my mind? But then I'll find it funny to just do that and put that image in someone else's mind and say some horrible toilet humor. So I think horror and humor are similar in that way, in that like they can have a certain power when you're hearing it, and then a different type of power when you're delivering it. But you've got to have humor to cope with life, and I do think you can ultimately laugh at anything. I mean, again, you have to have some distance. So, I'm going to a funeral on Thursday, and I don't think it's going to be that appropriate if I stand by the coffin and point at it and go, ha, 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 ha. That's really messed up. But is it appropriate to sometimes laugh in the face of extreme grief? Well, actually, yes. And I've had times in my life when I've been grieving, and I've been surprised at how much I've made jokes about it at the same time as sobbing about it. And it's just a tool to try and domesticate and understand and travel through the darkness. So yeah, I think humor is very, very important. And it's such a shame where the people who say we shouldn't have horror films might come along and say you shouldn't make a joke about that. When actually, I think you can probably make a joke about most things, but there has to be, I guess, an appropriate distance again between you and the thing you're joking about.
Did you ever watch the series Coupling?
No, I have. I know it. I know that title.
Years ago, probably.
Okay.
There's quite a few people in it that have gone on to do other stuff, but there's a particular episode of that because you mentioned funerals, where they're going to a funeral and they describe this idea of a giggle loop, where it's like laughing inappropriately. And as he's describing it, he's like stacking empty pint glasses, and how when you get so far, they topple over. And so they're like at the funeral trying not to laugh, and they're all like holding each other's hands and giggling. Trying not to, as it stacks more and more, because the more you think don't laugh, the more you want to laugh, right? So,
well, and if it's a stressful situation, you will end up doing that.
I mean,
laugh.
It's interesting. So I mean, sort of in your book, you talk about going to the premiere of Evil Dead, like the remake of Evil Dead, I think it is.
Yes, yeah.
Like the big cheer when she sticks the chainsaw through the Deadite's brain, and it's like, I get that, because I found myself not necessarily cheering, but kind of laughing, like when it's not over the top gore. It's just I can't help myself. I start giggling because it's just like, that's ridiculous, it's, but also gratuitous.
Exactly, yeah.
I do find myself having a giggle at, which sometimes in that sort of film the audience get. Sometimes when like things are blowing up in like what was it, District
9?
Yeah, District 9. District 9, I think. It was District 9, where they sort of the alien or they blow up one of their pursuers or something. And it's really gory. And I had the same reaction in the cinema. Everyone else there was taking it super seriously, and they'd sort of turn, sort of look at me. Like, oh, not a horror film, okay.
Yeah. And it's funny, because I do think these are all important things, but it's also important to like recognize, like, people who like horror don't only like horror. I mean, some people do, but I will gladly watch a romantic comedy and love it. I'll watch a sweet family film. I quite like corny stuff. I remember when I was writing my fourth novel, which was pretty intense, about like the world's first televised mass exorcism. And there was some really messed up dark stuff in that. And as a palate cleanser for that, I got really into watching an old TV show called The Love Boat, which is so saccharine and sugary and corny. But, you know, we are multifaceted people, and sometimes we like to have a laugh, and sometimes we like to be comforted, sometimes we like to cry. But sometimes we like to be scared. And to deny that part of our personality is to shut off an emotion that we're going to feel anyway. We're going to be frightened in this life, and we're going to be disturbed and anxious about things. And so because culture can be a tool by which we cope with these things, I just feel sorry for those who get told by their parents or their church or whatever, that's not for you. Because it's literally like taking away a coping mechanism and telling them, oh yeah, fend for yourself without this tool. And that's cruel, I think.
I get that. I mean, we're sort of drawing to the end of our questions now. I do have a couple of sort of off-script ones that I want to ask really quick before Craig puts in. So, firstly, how many people, I'm guessing some have at least, knowing your background, when they've contacted you with a story or someone's been put and say, oh, you should tell this guy, have you had any people say, can you now come and do something about it? You know,
yes. Yeah, I have had that. I've had people, certainly when I was working as a church minister, I've had people come and say, like, strange things are happening. Could you come to the house? I've had that, not often, but I've had that a couple of times. But yeah, since having the channel, I did have a few people who were like, you know, could you please come to this flat that these strange things are happening. And I think that was at the beginning. I did have the word reverend. I kept that on my thing, and then I was like, crap, I need to take that off, because I only do like 1 day a week of chaplaincy now, and really my main focus is YouTube and writing and creativity, and that's great with me. I don't want to give people the wrong impression that I'm like a full on like exorcist or something. Like I did a talk at at Fright Fest quite a few years ago about I was introducing a film called The Vatican Tapes, a possession film.
Oh yeah.
And so I did a talk, just a little brief talk at the premiere of that before the film went on. And then like the Daily Sport or the Daily Star, they went to like run a piece on me, full page, big picture of me, and it said, the UK's leading exorcist.
Excellent.
And I was like, what? Thankfully, they sent me this before it went to print. And I was like, I'm not even an exorcist, never mind the UK's leading one. And so these days I do kind of step back from that a bit, because I don't want people get the wrong impression that I'm like out there as some sort of cast out the demons type person. And I'm not even a paranormal investigator. People sometimes mistake that, and they'll think, oh, you're going to have to come down and bring all of your equipment to this castle where this strange stuff's happening. Call other people for that. I'm literally just a Peter Haining style, like journalist, just collecting, researching, interviewing, and then presenting the stories to make sure they're like honored and valued. And I like to freak people out as well, like people to get scared, for the reasons I've stated before. But yeah, I'm not planning on. There was about a year and a half ago, Discovery Channel were interested in me hosting a show for them. But the more we kind of talked about it, it was like, oh, you want me to start going into houses, don't you? And start like, I cast thee out and all this sort of thing. And I'm like, it's not me. Thanks very much.
I applaud the integrity there. You know.
Yeah. I don't even know if it's about integrity. It's just, I don't feel, again, it's because of this openness and creativity side of things. I don't feel comfortable just instantly saying, well, that's demonic. Because like, what happens if someone's suffering from like a mental health episode, and that's the thing that they need, or so I like the open-mindedness of the journalistic approach that says, hey, here's what I discovered, what do you think? That's where I feel most comfortable, because that's where I can stay a bit more neutral.
Do you pass people on to? Do you have anyone that you recommend they speak to?
Yes, yeah. So, for example, that the person who wanted me to come to their place, I didn't just sort of delete their email and pretend they didn't contact me. Like, block. No, I contacted someone else and said, would you be willing to talk to this other person? So to make sure you're not just neglected. But I've now started I took on a woman called Steph Lay, who helps me with the channel, and she's amazing. She's doing a really great project in Milton Keynes where she is currently finding ghost experiences of for every square of the grid of Milton Keynes. And so she literally just goes around to different places, organizes to meet people, and she'll just gather the stories. So you've got a story for every single grid on the map. And they're just coming out thick and fast.
That's a lot of haunted roundabouts.
That's a lot of, yeah, definitely. But she helps with the channel, and she's doing a really great job of helping with that. And the other day we were talking about how, like, we have to be careful not to give people the impression that we are like counselors or therapists or exorcists or anything like that. You know, we just want to be clear that we definitely want to offer kindness and support, but yes, to pass people on to the professionals if needed.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? If that goes wrong, well, you got cases like Michael Taylor, don't you? That
yeah, wow, that's a horrific story.
I think that was the first one we've covered on our channel that made us both just sort of go, you know, like, I don't know for you, Craig, but that was the first one that really got me, you know.
I think just before that, I think we tried to cover the Hungerford Massacre. I don't think we did a particularly good job.
That was like a bit of an off. Yeah, that was a bit. We went to Savanac to do ghost stories and the likes there, and then
we can't not mention it. Like, it happened here.
Yeah,
like, we can't just gloss over it. But yeah, I think we'd probably approach it differently now.
Yeah, it was then we discovered, at least at that time, we were nowhere near a true crime podcast. But sort of, it's like we sort of make little jokey comments, and it's like, we cannot do that with this one. Like, you just can't, you know.
Yes, yeah, there are certain things where you and actually with Into the Fog, because Into the Fog's quite a tightly organized machine in the sense of it's presenting almost like a documentary. So it's like here I'm, you know, like riffing and having a laugh, but it's not like that when I'm presenting these stories. I'm trying to like do them fairly seriously, really, well, very seriously, I should say. Occasionally you might drop in the odd little line that is funny, but yeah, on the whole, it's not quite the right place for it, I think. But in interviews and stuff like that, I feel like you can just loosen up a little bit with that.
My last sort of off the script question was, I was given this by a strange little bearded hermit. And his name's Craig.
I was just going to say, it's a bit rude the way I talked about Craig.
And it is water from the River Jordan.
Whoa, now, down to the River Jordan.
Well, it's claimed to be. I was just in this local shop that does like old clothes and
for
stuff.
local people.
So B&M.
It was. We don't have one of them. This is a tiny town.
Actually, we got another side to you, Pete. We got the singing, the comedy. You know, it's.
Oh yeah, getting the full works here.
He's going to dance next.
They had these bottles just hiding away in the corner of. Yes. Yeah. It says it's holy water and.
Wow.
Was it Bethlehem soil? I think. Holy Earth from Bethlehem.
Cool. We had a bit of a debate about it, and we didn't know what expert to ask, so we literally asked a mate of mine that was a Catholic. That was as far as an expert we got.
What did he say?
I was asking him, does it count as holy water? Because Craig was saying got some holy water, and I was like, I don't know if it counts as holy water.
Said it on the bottle.
Yeah, but I could write holy bottle on holy water on your bottle of mead. You know, it's
yeah.
So
you can have to splash it on a vampire, and then you'll know.
Oh, that's it. It was just more. What's your take on it? Does it need to be?
Well, I mean, not to get too theological about it, but I guess this is where you might find a difference between, say, me and the Catholic Church, because the Catholics are very strong on like religious hierarchy and ritualistic items. And so, for example, you have to be ordained to be able to deliver communion or the Eucharist, that sort of thing. However, I mean, I'm trained in the Baptist tradition, and Baptists are quite different from the ones in America. The Baptists in America are pretty hardcore fundamentalists, but in Britain, some of them are, but in Britain, there's plenty of kind of more open-minded ones. But the Baptists tend to be the opposite of that. They believe in something called the priesthood of all believers, which means that there's no real hierarchy, and so therefore any water could be holy. In a sense, everything is holy. So there's nothing special about a certain piece of water just because somebody kind of said a prayer over it. I mean, it can be still powerful, and prayer is powerful and that sort of thing. I'm not saying that, but I think in that kind of traditional worldview, there's this sense of we need this to be kind of have the Corgi gas fitter sort of approval on it, and that makes it efficacious. What's the word? Effective. That's effective. Whereas to me, efficacy. That's it. But to me, like anybody can call out to God for help. Like, you know, so like if you're in a paranormal situation, you don't have to like sit there and say, you know, oh, if only there was a priest round, because they would have the powers. Well, if God exists, then God is in your house too. So just ask for help yourself. And there's no kind of qualification needed for that, I don't think.
Well, thank you. So it depends what you're after out of holy water, I guess, Craig. The hunt continues, maybe. I don't know.
I don't want to disrespect your holy water, by the way. Like, you know,
you're helping me win the argument.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah, because I do think that there is a value in these sorts of things, and I have things in my room that are almost like ritual items. I know they're not, but like I've got like the bark of the tree from outside of H.P. Lovecraft's house when I was there last year, or I've got like bits and bobs like that because they're meaningful to me. But I think
that's what.
So go on.
I was just going to say, I guess that's what ascribes it power. You know, I've got some dirt from the field of Agincourt because I was like really into my longbow archery at the time.
Right, yeah.
You know, I've got some water from the White Well in Glastonbury, or a piece of the thorn from the Holy Thorn and stuff like that. So
yeah, and sometimes I just think like it's possible the objects themselves have some sort of power. Maybe I'm open to that. But to me, maybe it's more about the intention. It's more about the kind of the heart behind these things. And therefore, it means that, you know, somebody can have the most ritualistically blessed objects in the world, but if their heart isn't right and they're using them to exploit or hurt, then, you know, why would God honor that?
There you go, Craig. Don't use your holy water to exploit anyone.
But I still think you should test it on a demon or a
Yeah, but by then it's too late, because you got a demon coming at you. You splash holy water on them. It's not holy water. You're fucked, right? I mean,
well, I was thinking more like with a pipette, and just like,
right, yeah,
just try and casually drip it on, you know, people that you suspected demons.
Yeah. Okay.
I like that.
Work.
That's our next road trip.
Yeah,
spray people with holy water, then leg it before the police come and arrest these strange men.
Yeah. Oh, who knows? Maybe you can. Maybe it's like concentrate, like Kiora or something. Maybe you can like get it and put it into a bigger amount of water and make much more of it. Yeah, like put one droplet into like all of these buckets filled with it, and then just throw it on everyone and see who screams.
That's it. Maybe that can be sort of like homeopathic holy water.
That's right.
That might be my band
name.
Drop
a few
episode.
Drops into the swimming pool, the local baths.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
we can find all the local demons in one go.
That's right. That's the best idea. I like that one. Yeah, it's
Wessex
like
podcasters plan to poison water supply. Shocker.
So yeah, just I thought what might be fun, Peter, just to wrap up, because we've kept you for a really long time. Do apologise. But I wondered whether because we've talked quite a bit about horror films, whether you wanted to give us your top 5.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean that's a challenge because I love them all. But I mean, there are some that classically come to mind. Things like I really am a huge fan of the original Dawn of the Dead by George Romero.
Yes.
I think that's a masterpiece, that film. And I was lucky enough to meet George Romero, and he's just like absolutely lovely person. My favorite haunted house film is The Changeling with George C. Scott from 1980. I think that's a stunning.
I know that one.
Yeah, it's so good. But oddly enough, if you watched it back now, because it's been so influential on supernatural horror, you would go like, oh, it's a bit cliche. There's a ball bouncing down the steps and there's this and that. But this film was ahead of the curve doing these things. It's a really fantastic film. The Changeling. I've always really loved films like Reanimator and a werewolf film I made my family watch the other day, which I really enjoy, called Silver Bullet, a Stephen King 1980s horror movie. One. It's not the greatest film in the world, but I just, there's just something about it I love. And I like David Cronenberg's early work, The Brood. I'm a big fan of The Brood. So there's there's so many that I love. I love the 1950s version of Night of the Demon, which Jacques Tourneur film, which is a really quite scary, spooky film. But sometimes when people ask me what's the scariest film you've seen, I often think of Roman Polanski's Repulsion. That film really scared me. That really got under my skin, about a woman who's gradually going insane. And I think those sorts of topics are scary. The thought of your whole world turning into a horror show, a horror movie, but it's your own brain creating the horror.
Yeah.
Which, if you're watching a horror film, you could go, "Oh, what a cop out." But imagine that was your own life, and that
it's
could happen,
isn't it?
Inescapable, and that could happen. So you could say you don't have to be scared of werewolves because they're not going to happen, but it's possible that something could go wrong with your brain that you think werewolves exist.
Absolutely.
And so that thought is really quite frightening. So Roman Polanski's Repulsion is a film that explores that idea, and pretty disturbing, but fascinating.
I think that about wraps it up, Craig.
Yes, I think it does. I think we should let Peter get on with his evening.
Thank you. Well, it's been fun chatting to you, lovely people.
Really appreciate you coming on. It's been great hanging out. Lastly, could you tell, for anyone, I'm sure a lot of our listeners and viewers already do know, but for those that don't, sort of where they can find you, where to get everything that you do, really?
If you go to peterlaws.co.uk, you'll find all of my stuff there. But if you look on YouTube and search for Into the Fog with Peter Laws, that's where you'll find my channel and where I put my energies these days. And also, when I was doing podcasting, this was during COVID, actually, I started a weird podcast called Creepy Cove Community Church. And that was basically full and immersive church services broadcast from a haunted fishing town. And so people people listen to these episodes and they're literally like listening to a full church service with like horror characters who go to church. So it's like, Jason Voorhees does the Keep Fit class at the church, and, people from The Shining are in the nativity play. It's totally crazy. It's like a sort of mixture of comedy and well-being, because during COVID, I just had this sense that people might be feeling a bit lonely. And I noticed that my Christian friends had access to online communities through their church, but some of my friends didn't necessarily have that. So I thought, why not just invent a church that isn't based on geography, but based on an idea, which was horror, and it had spooky hymns in it and stuff like that. So that's another thing I got involved with. And I don't do that anymore, but all the seasons of that are still up at creepycove.com.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you again for joining us, everyone. And until next time,
stay weird.